Greetings from Dubai and Washington, D.C., ladies and gentlemen. The devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global tourism has carried on right into 2021, with new data showing an 87% fall in international tourist arrivals in January as compared to 2020. Following a difficult end to 2020, global tourism has suffered further setbacks in the beginning of the year as countries tighten travel restrictions in response to the new virus outbreaks. Tourism barometer has shown that all world regions continue to experience large drops in tourist arrivals in the first month of the year. Uh, at the same time, that all destinations are at a different level of opening, reopening, then closing, reclosing, and then opening again. Global travel has suffered a loss of almost 4.5 trillion in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. And the activity in 2021 is set to only rise to levels that are less than half the pre-crisis volume, following a greater than 70% drop in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to our Recovery Town Hall series today is a very special guest from the US because I really feel the time is right now to get a US perspective. And the guest we have today is President and CEO of Destination DC. Welcome, Mr. Elliott Ferguson.
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to speak with you and, of course, your global audience as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Destination DC serves as a lead organization to successfully manage and market Washington, DC as a premier global convention, tourism, and special events destination with a special emphasis on the arts, culture, and historical communities. Destination DC is a private, I believe, nonprofit corporation with a membership of over 1,000 businesses, organizations that support the DC travel and tourism sector, making you one of the most effective organization serving the United States of America. Your connections, your visibility, resources, and ways to engage to help to grow businesses and maximize its role in DC is nearly 7.8 billion of travel and tourism economy. Could you share with us on how Destination DC supports its members in this during this pandemic time?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it best. It's for us, it's all about the fact that we're an economic development organization, and the city really relies on tourism to bring new jobs to the city right now to the tune of 80,000 people. I think few people realize that Washington, D.C. only has 700,000 people that physically live in the District of Columbia. So what we do as an industry is extremely important. Of course, the largest employer in the city is the federal government. And so as we look at a growing market, tourism plays a huge role in the economics of Washington as a whole. And our members are really tied to our efforts to promote DC domestically, internationally, to all types of business, including business travel. So they are looking at us and looking towards us in terms of coming up with solutions to share with the global community how attractive Washington is above and beyond monuments, memorials, and museums, which is always going to be a part of the visit. But to the point you made earlier, to talk about the how walkable DC is, how green our destination is, sporting events, nightlife, our great restaurant scene, theater, the arts, the history of the city, the architecture of the city, and they're relying on us on a regular basis to focus on all those things that, quite frankly, bring people back to Washington over and over and over again. During the pandemic, it's been all about going virtual, sharing with individuals what to expect, to whet their appetites, if you will, so that when the opportunity exists for them to come to Washington, which is happening now, they'll want to come back and explore a lot of the things that perhaps they've seen and done during the pandemic from a virtual perspective. The fact that the Smithsonian's represent 17 museums in Washington and in Virginia, and they're all free, and that includes the zoo. As people are looking at traveling again, Washington is a value-added destination because you don't have to pay as much for all the things you see and do for you and your family while you're visiting the city. And that's what our members are expecting from us. How do we market Washington post or during the pandemic, making sure that safety is a priority, but people understand how they can engage and come to Washington and socially distance because there's so many things you can physically do outside.
Right. Uh, so, U.S. Domestic tourism activity has partially recovered in the second half of 2020. Travel spending was estimated to fall by 45% in 2020, with road travel in the region partially replacing air travel. So recovery of domestic trips in the second half of 2021 and into 2022 with full domestic recovery expected by when? 2023? So what are the challenges currently that you are facing? What are the hindrances? What are the roadblocks to a full recovery?
Well, I think that, one of the things that is unfortunate for the US and global community is the fact that we are not able to receive the global community into the United States in the same numbers that we saw in 2019 and up to the time we shut down as from a global perspective. So, we're disappointed because we're not going to see those international visitors come, especially in 2022. International visitors in the US stay longer and they spend more, so they're extremely important to us. Our city is still, we're still not 100% open. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because we're still dealing with the pandemic and getting people vaccinated. And so as we're looking towards our mayor to focus on forecasting what will look like 6 months from now, what could potentially be open as we are getting vaccinated and as cases of COVID continue to decline, that's going to be a big deal for us. So, not having that international visitor, not having the business traveler come to Washington right now, not having the large congresses or quite frankly, meetings of any size meeting on a regular basis that have continued to hurt us. And that's what we're working towards in terms of promoting what DC, what you can do in DC in June, July, and beyond as we're looking at fighting this pandemic.
That's very refreshing to hear from you because a lot of our audiences believe or there is a perception that the US market doesn't care for the international global tourism, but I think your destination is so uniquely placed in that respect, so there is a certain level of reliance on international travel. And, so
No, I totally agree. But I mean, I would say not only Washington, D.C., but the U.S. as a whole truly covets and wants the international traveler to come back. To your point, we are an international city. We have 185 embassies in Washington, D.C., a large melting pot from a global perspective of people that live in Washington. We love all visitors coming to the city. But I definitely want to make sure that the international community understands how important it is, not only to Washington as a city, but of course the Biden administration and others as we try to find ways to make it easier for the international community to gain access to a visa and to make the travel process a lot easier coming into the US.
Okay, that's really good to hear that, Elliott. That's a very, very key, important message, I think, which will come out of this meeting. So, as reported in January 2021, half of American travelers indicated they're excited about travel in the near term, and 55% of American travelers are in a ready-to-travel state of mind. The availability and the distribution of the vaccine continues to be, of course, a major factor in return to normalcy for many travelers. What is your perspective on the tourism industry as a whole post-pandemic?
Yeah, I feel that based on all the data, not just my perception as a guy that is a marketing that's responsible for marketing our destination, but the data tells us that various communities want to get back on the road. They want to travel and really get out of their homes. I mean, many people have not been on trips since March of last year. So we feel as if there is going to be a rebound, and that rebound is going to be tied to safety measures that are in place in various destinations. As you know, the United States is comprised of 50 states and 6 territories, including the District of Columbia. and each one of those areas can create their own rules and regulations as it pertains to what you can see and do, what you can do during this pandemic. States like Florida seemingly are, and others as well. But I think the key thing is to make sure that safety is a priority, and that folks feel comfortable in realizing that the safety protocols in place, and they can in fact travel to various parts of the U.S., realizing that we are putting the vaccine, being vaccinated as a priority and as a way to get back on track. So we're already seeing visitation. We're seeing it in Washington on the weekends, and our goal as the Smithsonian's give us an indication as to how they plan to reopen. We'll see more visitors wanting to come to Washington, realizing that that we are taking safety very, very serious. Many free things to see and do, and as sailing on the Potomac River, or taking a cruise rivers that are that surround Washington D.C., and how you can do things outside and socially distance. So I think that's going to work in our favor as a destination, and as well as the U.S. as we're focusing on that everyone getting vaccinated.
Okay, great. So in a weekly report, January 2021, the percentage of Americans who feel the pandemic situation in the US will get worse in the next month fell by 6.5% to 43%, the lowest it has been since September 27, 2020. While travel sentiment declines somewhat, it is important to note that travel sentiment overall remains in one of the better positions. It has been since the start of the pandemic. So my question is that there is a sentiment that it will get worse before it gets better. So what is the adjustment of phase 2 of reopening of the tourism in DC? Do you have an adjustment period? Do you have an adjustment strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping that those people are wrong in terms of how they perceive the recovery. And it's already been seen that we're seeing lower numbers of cases. We're seeing higher numbers of people actually being vaccinated. So we think it's going to go in the opposite direction, is that it'll continue to get better. And that's very, and it's not just DC, but I mean, it's from the federal government. Focusing on having the vaccine available to all Americans by the end of next month, which is key to herd immunity and key to us getting back on track. So, we're very optimistic, cautiously so. We recognize the fact that being vaccinated is just a part of it. You still have to socially distance to a certain extent and wear a mask. But with those things in place, if we had this conversation in April or May of last year, I clearly would not be able to articulate what I could only be optimistic back then that this hopefully would have been over with by the fall or winter of last year. But now I'm much more optimistic simply because of what the federal government is focusing on as it pertains to safety.
That's really good to hear that. That's very, very important. So the majority of Americans are currently not comfortable socializing in gatherings, hopefully, because the media sometimes projects a different picture. But more than 6 in 10, 62% are not at all comfortable attending a large sporting event or concert, while 56% are not comfortable going to an indoor party. 43% are not comfortable going out to eat or drink indoors, and so forth. Could you please share with us how sports tourism could support the restarting of the activity?
Yeah, I mean, we recognize the fact that consumer confidence is still inconsistent, and I think that people should still remain concerned. I think the concern is tied to the fact that we are still focusing on getting the vaccine out, but not everybody is vaccinated. Right. So if I'm not vaccinated, fortunately I am, But hypothetically, if there's a person that's not vaccinated, they should still remain concerned about travel. I think the key thing, as we continue to listen to the scientists and the medical experts on this vaccine, on COVID-19, is that we do continuously have to focus on practicing social distancing and wearing a mask. I think that's key to, and of course, getting the vaccine in that order, getting the vaccine, and then of course doing all the other things. And that ties into a higher level of consumer confidence. You know, I am much more confident now in terms of physically traveling. I'm on business travel right now, and I felt much more confident knowing that I've been vaccinated and that there's a higher probability of people around me being vaccinated, but still wearing their personal protection equipment than before. So that is understandable, and that's something that we're focusing on as it pertains to the safety precautions and measures that are in place in Washington as people consider coming to our destination.
Right. That's so. So there is a strategy in place. You know, you think that sports tourism could be something important and a critical factor in all of it?
Yeah, I think so. You know, as you're looking at sports, and that is your question, correct? Sports tourism. You know, most of the venues are outdoors. So, you know, the scientists have said that wearing your PPE outdoors in that environment, there's the potential of catching the virus is reduced significantly. But even as we're looking at indoor venues, the fact that you're limiting the number of people physically able to come to sporting events right now, therefore people can socially distance. But as we get further along with people being vaccinated, that will hopefully change as well, for obvious reasons. So there is an excitement about being able to physically go back to sporting events. There's a reality in Washington, D.C., as many of our venues are outdoors, but even the indoor venues are large enough whereas you can reduce the number of people that are physically attending, therefore giving people a chance to socially distance, especially as we're focusing on the seasons between now and next year.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some of your protocols, requirements for DC destination, you know, because the district government issued updated travel requirements effective March 3rd, 2021 for anyone traveling into Washington, DC. So what is the travel protocol requirements? Could you please elaborate on
that? Yeah, the latest iteration of protocol takes place on May 1st. Okay. And it allows for larger numbers. Well, it allows for actual visitors to sporting events, something we just talked about. Mm-hmm. It allows for, instead of 10 people or less physically meeting indoors, it looks at the percentage of the size of the space for indoor meetings and takes a percentage of that and say, well, if let's say you have 1,000 square feet, 25% of that can be occupied by people versus the number being 10 or lower. So there's more optimism as we look at being able to increase the number of people that can physically meet in person, the number of people that can physically meet in a museum or attend museums are now at 50%. Restaurants are still at 25%, and we're hoping that number will increase as well. Mm-hmm. But the key thing is that the opportunities continue to change in terms of what you can do indoors and at events starting May 1st.
Okay, that's good. That's all positive news. So in February 2021, travel spending tallied just 51.4 billion, roughly the same as January, and reflected a 38% drop below February 2020 levels. Following the May the 1st goal to open vaccine eligibility to all US adults, 60% are confident we will return to normal by summer. So, and what is the marketing strategy to revive the destination now? How are you pacing your marketing strategy? Because I've been talking to a few destinations, and few just clamped up and they said, okay, there is no point in spending your marketing dollars. First, it was save it for 2021. Now they are saying save it for 2022. What is your approach?
Yeah, we're not that conservative. I think that we're looking at right now we're in the spring in the U.S. and you're seeing more and more people traveling. And so our campaign is tied to communicating what is physically open, what things people can do in the city, and what the protocol is in terms of being a guest in Washington, D.C. I'm optimistic. It's not going to return to where we were in 2019 in 2021. And we'll see, based on the experts, we'll see stronger gains in terms of visitation in 2022. But as we look at the larger Congress's meeting, again, we're hoping that we'll see some of them in place in 2021 with a hybrid meeting, which would be tied to a portion physically meeting in person and a portion of doing what we're doing now in a Zoom link or what have you. But the domestic traveler, they're ready to get out there. They're ready to get on the road. What we're doing in our marketing is promoting, what is open, promoting what the protocol is, because as much as I want to know how amazing your hotel suite is, I want to know what protocol is in place to make sure that people are, that my family is safe or I'm safe as I'm looking at traveling. So our marketing is tied to more regional draw. We have about 50 million people that live within 250 miles. I don't know what that is in kilometers of Washington, but let's just say a 4-hour drive. And that's a pretty large market. And we're banking on that market to want to get back on the road sooner than later, perhaps not get on a plane because they're looking at bringing their families. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel that airline travel is extremely safe, but you're looking at the perception of consumers. And we're looking at all angles, be it flying into the city, taking the train into the city, or driving, and making sure that people understand what's open, what the protocol is for safety, and then offering itineraries to them as to what they can physically do while they're looking at coming into the city. So our marketing right now is tied to that region, that regional draw, and hopefully beyond that we'll expand it. We have we have continued to focus on the 4 international offices that we have and their ability to continue to focus on the international market. I don't agree that we should do nothing. I don't necessarily agree that 3 months ago I would have done a huge advertising campaign about coming to Washington when things were closed. But as we're looking at moving forward, our advertising is tied to what is open and how you could enjoy our destination right now and hopefully in the summer months and months to come.
Fantastic. Yeah, good to hear that. Good to hear that. It's all green shoots for me, that this kind of thinking is very essential. And in this, because everybody is at a different pace and a different level, so this
Right.
is that what others can learn from. Which brings me into my next topic is, today you sitting in, I'm going a little bit off the track from the questions that I had outlined, but I just feel that you are just the right person to ask this question. Because you today sitting in Washington, D.C., I'm in Dubai. We are having this conversation because of technology that really was hardly apparent. It was there, but was not being utilized the way it's being used today for people to meet up. Touchless is here to stay, with 41% of global transactions being carried out using contactless technology. 74% of Americans say they plan to continue using contactless even after the pandemic is over. So going digital technology, these are the big gains. How do you think this is? Because you're sitting in Washington and it's a big, big meetings business destination. Give me a sense. What does the future look like? Is hybrid, face-to-face meetings, the combination? What's going on?
To your point, I think it's all of the above. I think that there have been a lot of organizations that would have not necessarily thought that a hybrid style meeting would be effective. As a matter of fact, they were maybe looking at it through a lens of, no, you must be there in person. And I think now we realize that we can still accomplish and carry out the duties and responsibilities of whatever we do professionally in a virtual world. However, we also recognize the fact that we miss human interaction, and that human interaction allows us to be more purposeful in terms of connecting and creating a more robust sales environment. Where we are now is a necessity, but where we will be is tied to, okay, we've learned some invaluable lessons in terms of how we can benefit from a virtual style of meeting, but we don't want this to replace the opportunity to meet in person. Meeting in person, human interaction, selling me your product in person is far more effective than what we're doing now. So I absolutely think that there will be a hybrid, especially in the next 12 to 18 months. And then beyond that, organizations will look at it and say, well, you know, what have we learned during that hybrid experience that perhaps we'll still offer that, especially for Congresses, as a revenue generator for us and as an opportunity to include those that may not have the budgets to physically travel. But I assure you, in my heart of hearts, I know for a fact, because I'm one of those people, U.S. Travel Association, we met in person in Tampa, Florida last month, and we were so excited, to meet in person and have about 60% of the attendees physically there, with 40% or so in a virtual environment, which they wanted to be there in person as well. So I feel like we will rebound in that regard, but we will still incorporate some of the things we've learned into our thinking and our way of doing business moving forward.
Thank you. That's great to hear that. And any lasting message to the world, to the globe, to my international audience?
No, absolutely. I think that, as the global community continues to focus on the same things we're focusing on, which is, saving lives, keeping people healthy and safe, they're also being exposed to what's happening in different parts of the world. I think the global community sees what's happening in America and the lessons in which we've learned with the former administration and the former president, and how do we move forward in a more positive way in terms of race relations, in terms of building a global community and making sure that people feel as if America is indeed welcoming. And I think that is extremely important as we move forward. I think that it's an opportunity from our perspective to correct some of the things in which we've been dealing with as a nation, be it race relations, be it some of the other things that are out there that which we have to focus on to do better as a destination, and to make sure that the global community knows that they're welcomed to come to America. We celebrate more the fact that as human beings around the world, that we have more things alike and in common than we have that are different. But I think that travel gives us an opportunity to also appreciate our differences, be it me coming to the UAE or other parts of the world. And I think that interaction is missing, and that's what we want. But equally as important, we want the global community to know that we are taking responsibility for some of the things in America that we need to correct. We're holding our current administration responsible and talking to them about making sure that the global community can in fact travel back to the US, do feel welcome, feel safe as they're coming here, because it's extremely important to us and extremely important to Washington, D.C. as a destination. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to offer my perspective, because it's extremely important that message resonates.
Thank you, Elliott. I mean, America is still that beacon of hope. It holds that position no matter what anybody feels or says today, But I think everybody feels good about your new current administration, and we all look towards US. Thank you so much for this messaging, and hopefully, we meet in person.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and enjoy the rest of your day, and hello and goodbye to the rest of the audience.
Thank you. Thank you.